So you can see how my chart is a little marked up already from today's session. I'm going to go ahead and delete everything after we do a little recap, and then we'll go over exactly how I found all these levels. So first off, the 3 lines that I have here, this is what I do every single day at 10:30. So the first hour of the day, you look for the initial balance. You can do initial range or you can do initial balance. Both are going to be found during the first hour of the day. Let me go ahead and remove this for now. So when you take the first hour, if you want to be looking for initial balance, they are 2 different things. So initial balance would be grabbing the volume profile of the first hour of the day and then taking the value area low, the value area high, and the POC. You typically don't have to take the POC. I like to take it just to get a little bit more confluence. But that would be the initial balance. The initial range would be taking the high and the low. So you could take the high and the low. I've found that the value area is much more accurate. So I typically take the value area instead of the range. But either or is fine. So that is where these lines come from. Let me turn the... Actually, we're going to keep the volume profile off. Let me find my chart that I posted in Discord. This will help you guys see it better. Okay, so here was the first thing that I posted today. We had the initial balance. It was slightly bearish right when it was formed. So it was kind of below that 439 area. But then you bounced up and you tested the initial balance high. Then we had the next chart that I posted here. And I said, this little pullback here, if you were to pull back and retest the initial balance high, as long as you held there, this would be very bullish. Okay. So then we had this chart here. And we can see that that little pullback held beautifully. And then we started to find value higher, right? So let me get rid of these 3. And then next up we had this one here. So now we retested the initial balance. We started to bounce out of it. And we were looking for value. So once it started to build value here, this becomes kind of like the point that you need to hold above so you can break out higher. So I posted in Discord, SPY building value up here. It needs to stay above this level to launch again. Okay, so then we had this chart here. So we can see that it kind of pulled back on this little 5-minute candle and you held above that value. So then we went higher. Okay, so we're continuing to find value. So then we had a little retest of that level. So then it came back to retest that value. And now look at what it's doing. Now it's starting to build more value above that initial value that it found. Okay, and then we have the retest holding here. And now we're going higher again. So now it's trying to find more value higher than that initial range. So then let's see what happens after that. Then we had a little pullback. So you see how it tried to push up? This creates a single print. So a single print is exactly what it sounds like. It's when you push into a level and you create single prints. You create an area that it only tested one time. You didn't really find any value in that area. It only tested it one single time. So you had that single print come in, and now we came back to retest that initial value when we broke out. Okay, so this is the support that it needs to hold if it wants to go higher. Let's see what it did from here. So next up, I posted another chart. Let me delete these old ones. I wanted to point out this volume gap that was forming. So you see how we have this value up here? We're forming kind of like a secondary node. So you have a node here, you have a node here, and then you have a node here. So you've kind of like 3 big nodes, and then you have an area in between that kind of gave you a volume gap. So then I posted this chart to let you guys know there's a volume gap there that it's trying to fill. So we are breaking below this this value right here, but we're just kind of coming down to fill that volume gap. So then let's see what it did after that. Then I posted this chart. So we clearly did not fill in that gap. We just blew through the gap and we came back to our initial range. So these three lines here, if you guys remember, let me go back to our first chart. If you guys remember, these three lines were the initial balance of the day, right? So we have the initial balance here. That's where we're coming back to retest. So we failed our initial support, which was this level here. Then we failed the gap. So then the only support that was remaining was our initial range. We have the initial range high, and then we have the initial balance high, and then we have the initial balance low. Okay. Let me delete these. So we pulled back, didn't like the gap fill. We're almost caught up to real time. Let me find the next chart. And then we had this chart here. So now look at what it did. Let me go back to the other one. So you see how there's a gap here? Right around 440.30. Now look at it. There's no gap. It has filled in the gap. And you'll see this quite often. When you have those little gaps, the volume gaps on the day, you like to fill those in just like you like to fill in price gaps. Okay, so here's a volume gap. Notice how there's no price action here. And now look at what it did. There's tons of price action there. So it filled in that gap. And then that is pretty much it. Then we have one more chart here that I just posted because we are starting to get a little bit more bullish. Notice how we bounced off the initial balance high, then we bounced up, came back down, and we kind of filled in that gap a little bit more, but it put in a higher low. So now we have a higher low here, and then we broke the POC, bounced off the POC. So this is pretty bullish. You're kind of indicating that you want to go higher. So then, because we don't have any levels above us, because it's an all-time high, we have to take Fibonacci levels. So we grabbed the low of the day to the high of the day, and that gives us these fib levels, right? So now if we break out of like 441, we should get to 441.60, 441.80. And that would be kind of how you would day trade those levels. So now let's go back to the current chart. And notice how this little pink box here, let me go back to when I first called this out. This is what it looked like when we first called it out. That was like the initial value that it was finding after the breakout, right? Now look at what it looks like. Now it's the POC. So that initial level that was finding value ended up being the most important level of the entire day. Because now it's the POC, and now we're kind of breaking away from the POC. So we're getting pretty bullish here. All right. So we can actually get rid of this gap. It's no longer a gap. And now look at what our profile looks like. So let's actually compare this. This is the first hour of the day. Let me hide this one. This is the first hour of the day. That's what the profile looks like. It's kind of balanced. Not really any direction. And then you broke out of that, so you were slightly bullish. And now let's get rid of this. And now look at the current profile. Now the current profile is very bullish. Most of the value is towards the high of the day. And we do have a lot of value below us, but we're breaking away from that. So it's showing that we had value here, but now we are finding higher value. So we can also get rid of this, because now that's just the POC. So now the only levels that we really care about are the value area high, which would be that level there. And then we have like the high a day, which would be like that level there. So once we break out of that zone, like I said, there's no value above us because it is all-time high. You would have to grab a Fibonacci. So you take the fib from here to here. This becomes a big bull flag, right? and that's our breakout zone. So we'll see by the end of today if we can get that breakout. But for now, I'm gonna get rid of these lines just to kind of clean the chart up a little bit. Does that make sense? That's how I did the analysis throughout the entire day, if you guys were following in Discord. It is not complicated. Once you understand kind of where the levels are coming from, you can do this on anything. You can do it on regular stocks. You can do it on Bitcoin, which I'm going to show you here in a second. So a couple more tricks here. That's the initial balance, right? So how was today forming? So let's go through and just look at how today was forming. So this would have been the first hour. Let's take a look up until like this breakout here. So if we were seeing a profile like this, this is obviously extremely bullish. Most of the volume is towards the high. We do have some single prints up here, so we have a little bit of resistance. So if you wanted to mark that out, you could. You could have marked out like this level here as resistance, because this was giving you kind of a wick zone where it's single printed. And then anything above this area right here, we're going to get rid of the initial balance for now, just so I can make this easier to understand. Anything above this area, the value area low, would be a bullish retest, right? Anything that came down to kind of test that low would be bullish. And then in hindsight, there never were any tests down here. But let's just say like we were looking at something like this, and we were looking for an entry. You could look at the value area low, and then if you wanted a really good entry, and like something kind of like a scam wick happened, you want to pay attention to like these areas right here. These like single print areas, these are inefficiencies. So this would be a price inefficiency that's basically like a volume gap. And then we have a little zone of support right here. You see where the value starts to climb right here? The volume starts to climb, but in between there is nothing. So this is an inefficiency. This is kind of like a support. So if you wanted to get like a really good entry for maybe a scalp or something, you could put some limits down here. So if it came to retest that inefficiency, it would typically bounce right out of that area if it was really strong. So if this was a very bullish day, it would come down and test that area and it would bounce right out of it. So if you had some limits set there, you could get a very good entry. Now, there is a little bit of a risk to that because this is an inefficiency, it doesn't have to bounce out of it. It could do what we saw on SPY today, and it could like hang out and fill that area in. And that's going to scare you a little bit if you were just trying to scalp that. So watch out for that. If it wants to blow through this level, you have to understand where your supports are too. So like we have major supports here, here, and here. So if we're putting our limits right here, you have to understand that you're risking it coming down to retest these support levels. So depending on how tight you want to have your stop loss, you need to use these as support. So like if you wanted a very tight stop loss, you could put your stop loss below this initial node. So like there. If you wanted a little bit further, you could put it below the second node. So like there. If you wanted it to be like pretty safe, you would put it below all of the nodes. So we have all three nodes here acting as support. Then our stop loss would be below those nodes. Okay. So that would be kind of like an entry technique. Now, in hindsight, obviously today that did not happen. So if you were looking for an entry like that, you did not get it. Now, if you were looking for a more a normal entry, it'd be right around that kind of value area low. So anywhere towards that value area low, that is a place that you could look to buy the dip, right? Because today is very bullish. We have that kind of P-shaped volume profile. We have a long bottom, and then we have most of the value towards the high. That creates a P shape. So with P shapes, you are safe to buy the lows, but you want to be careful selling the highs. And this is why you want to be careful selling the highs, because You could have sold the highs up here and it would have worked. But if you tried to sell the highs up here, you would have got wrecked. So on bullish days, you want to be careful selling the highs. But you're safe to buy the lows. Anytime you would have bought the lows before the breakouts, you would have been okay. Okay, so let's move on a little bit here. So there's your value area low. Let's just take this a little bit further, just to see how today would have been developing. So we take it further. Nothing has changed. You're still in a P shape. You still have a little bit of resistance up here. You actually filled in a little bit of the resistance. Now we have some more kind of up in this area here. Let me drag that out. And our value area high, or sorry, value area low has actually increased a little bit. Notice how the value area low has gone up a little bit. So nothing has really changed. We're just going to keep going. Let's just say we keep going here. Okay, so now the value area low is going up a little bit more. Nothing has changed. Still finding value higher. Still in a P shape. So you're still bullish here. One thing you want to start noting is your value area high. So like this is where you're not really finding any value above that level. Okay, so when we start to break that level, that's when we're starting to get very bullish. All right, so let's keep going. So same thing, value area high is kind of staying where it is. Value area low still increasing a little bit, which is bullish. As your value area low increases, that is bullish because you're finding a higher value. Okay. So let's keep going. Nothing has changed. Same thing, value area low is going up a little bit. So you're still getting more bullish. And as I'm pulling this out, just understand that pretend like we don't see this. Wherever the volume profile is ending, pretend like that's all we see, right? I'm trying to show you guys how to do it step by step. Just pretend like we don't see this. Okay, so nothing has really changed. The value area high has changed a little bit. So if you want to pull that down, you could. Everything else has stayed the same. So we're going to keep pulling it. Same thing here. The value area high has shifted a little bit lower. Value area low has stayed relatively the same. And now we're finally starting to see a breakout here. So let me actually hide this for a second. How do I want to do this? Let me just put this on the left. There we go. So we have our value area high. We have our value area low. POC is very neutral. And then we finally start to see our breakout. So once you start to break above the value area high, you're entering finding value, right? You're looking for value. So it's getting more bullish, and it's trying to find value higher. Okay, so if we were to keep grabbing this, let's do this slowly so you can see it. Notice this right here. You see how above the value area high, you're just falling off? It's not really finding any value just yet. Keep an eye on that while I pull this. So we're going to pull this out slowly. You see how it's starting to build? Okay, so now this is starting to build. Let me go back a little bit. And I'll screenshot this actually to make this easier. Let's screenshot this here. And then I'm going to pull this out a little bit. And now let's screenshot it again. You see the difference here? Look at the value up here. There's like no value, right? Now look at what it's doing. It's building. It's building more value here. So when that happens, as you're breaking out, you can do exactly what I did on SPY today. I did this in real time in Discord. You can grab that node that you're starting to find value. So like this is where you started to build. And let's just pull this out. Okay. And I'm going to get rid of this for now. So we're going to pull that out. Just remember, this is where we're currently looking. Oh, I lost it. Let me see if I can find it. It's at 1305. Okay, let me grab that. 1305. Okay, so that's what we're currently looking at. Everything after this is pretend like we don't see that. Okay. So now we have this node right here that's building. So we know that that is a zone of influence. So if we're bullish here, we need to break that as soon as possible and turn that into support. Okay. And look at what we did. We started at the bottom above the value area high, which is extremely bullish. So we have the value area high here. If this pulled back inside the value area high, that's really bad. That means that we're most likely going to go back down to POC or most likely go back down to the value area low. But we're not. We're actually bottoming above the value area high. This is extremely bullish. So then it bounces, and then we flip this area. Look at that. I have not pulled out the volume profile yet. This is still that same zone. So this zone right here that we were building, now we're flipping it into support. So as soon as you start flipping this, this is extremely bullish. And look at how price reacted. Price just went straight up. Okay. You see the difference in the volume profile now? So we had that like zone of influence. It was creating that value. It was actually creating value bearishly. So typically this would be bearish. So you're seeing that little top there, kind of a top there, and then you have that top right there. So it's actually creating a bearish node. But as long as the bearish node doesn't force you back into the value area, it's okay. So this did not force you back into the value area, so it's fine. So the initial value area is still holding. We were not pushed back inside of it. So as long as that node breaks and then we hold it as support, it's very bullish. So then we broke it, we held it as support, and then we ripped. And now look at what it's doing. So we're almost caught up to real time. So now look at what it's doing. I'm going to delete these. Let's get rid of that. Let's go ahead and make this real time actually. Okay, so this would be real time. So now what are we looking at? We have a zone of influence right here. We have a little volume gap, which is a single print right there. And then we have another little zone of influence kind of right here, a little resistance. And I'm going to actually get rid of this one. We just went over that. We're going to close this. Let's adapt our value area. And I like to use different lines so I don't get confused. So typically with value area lines, I use the dash lines. And then for the gaps, I'll use a solid line. Okay, so this is real time. So there's no more hindsight. This is 100% real time. So now how do we look at Bitcoin right now? This is our value area. So this is the major support moving forward. It has to stay above 39,150. There's a support above that. If it wants to be extremely bullish, it has to hold above 39,000, let's say 750. And then if it wants to start breaking out, it has to break out above 40,300. If you're looking for a scalp, kind of like what I was saying earlier, you can use these inefficiencies as kind of like entries, but they're very risky. So if you're using this, let me actually move this over. Let's go back to right here. If you're using this as like an entry, it has to be extremely bullish because this little pullback has to immediately bounce out of that zone for that trade to make sense, right? If you're using this as an entry, let's say you entered right here on this pullback, your stop loss would have to be below the most local node. So like this would be the riskiest stop loss. And then if you wanted a safer stop loss, you'd have to put it below the next node. So like there's the first node, here's the next node. So your stop loss would be like right there if you were being conservative. And then if you were being very conservative, it would be below the next node, which would be a little ridiculous. Your risk to reward there would not be good. Okay. But just understand that these gaps, there's two things that happen normally. Either wicks, like you're currently seeing now, or a long period of consolidation to fill in that inefficiency, which we saw this morning on SPY. Let me grab that chart and I'll show you. If you guys are just coming in, here is the gap on SPY, and then look at what we did. That gap got completely filled in. So you can see that happen quite often as well. So if you're going for that scalp and you're looking to just get a wick kind of like this, and it starts to fill in, your trade is basically dead. You gotta watch out for that. Another thing would be, if you failed this local support here, where are you most likely going to? You're most likely going back down to the value area high. There's a little bit of support right there that you could wick out of because it's kind of like a volume gap. So if you wanted to mark that level, you could. It's not a single print, so it's not a massive price inefficiency. It's just kind of like a little volume gap. But same thing goes for kind of what we said back here. You could wick out of that. So if you did break the support right here, you could kind of wick off that level, then bounce. But it's more likely that you would go down to value area high, excuse me. And another trade here is if you lose the value area high. So let's say we go down, we lose this level. This creates a very high strike rate trade down to the POC or down to the value area low. Okay. So if we leave the value area, we cannot find value, and then we retrace into the old value, it's very likely that you will travel the entire range. This wouldn't be the exact 80% trade, Jay. That I'm going to go over. This would be very similar. It's a very high strike rate. This wouldn't be the exact 80% trade, though. And sorry, guys, I'm not really reading chat too much. I'm trying to give you guys a little lesson here. So let me actually show you what an 80% trade would look like. Here's an example here, actually. Okay, so when you have a previous value area, so like this is our previous value area, and then we nuke that value area, right? So we nuke it, we're finding lower value. This day doesn't really matter, but let's just say like we're finding lower value. Okay, whatever. And then we have this day here. So if you're looking for a scalp trade, if you return, so you were previously trading outside the value area, and now we are returning inside of that value area, there is an 80% chance that you will travel the entire section of that value area. Okay, so if you have like a failure, and then you retrace into it, this is an 80% trade. If it's happening in the same day, it's not an 80% trade, but it's kind of the same thought process. But it has to be a closed day, like that. This day has to be finished. So this day is finished, and then we retrace back into it. And notice how beautifully those levels acted. You see that value area high, value area low? Look at how these levels acted here. You popped up inside of it, came back to retest it, and then popped back, and your 80% trade was fulfilled. So this would be like a scalp, because the value area is so small, that would only be like a scalp trade. Does that work on every time frame? Yeah, it works on every time frame. I typically like to use it on dailies. Like, you don't want to use like weekly profiles or monthly profiles. You can, but I find that it works better on the daily profiles. This is actually an example of it failing. So it doesn't work every single time. So here's a good example of that. So we have the value area high, we have the value area low, and then we open up on this day outside of the value area. So then it traces back inside of it, but it doesn't fulfill the entire trade. So this is why you want to use the POC as well. So a lot of people ignore the POC. This is why I like to use the POC. Because look at this there. If you look at the POC, that shows you why you did not fulfill that 80% trade. Because you popped up, you tried to make it to the other side, but you could not break the POC. And then look at that bottom there. If you're wondering kind of what sent us higher on Bitcoin, look at that. That is a failure of an 80% probability trade. So that tells you that things are extremely bullish. Yeah, the POC can be used as a take profit, exactly. So the POC held you up there, and it didn't allow you to fulfill that trade. And then you popped up, and you ripped. Okay, so that's all hindsight, right? Let's talk about what we're seeing right now. So Bitcoin is going to close most likely outside of its value area, unless it trades here for like the rest of the day, and it pushes the value area higher, which would be unlikely. It's most likely going to close outside the value area. So tomorrow, it could give you an 80% trade. So be on the lookout for that. So we have the value area high, value area low. They're probably going to shift before the day is over. But let's just say the day closes in like an hour or so. Let's just say it's about to close. If it closes out here, and then it loses this level, you could scalp that down to the POC or down to the value area low. Okay. So watch out for that level. All right, so that's Bitcoin. Let me actually show you guys how you could use this on like a normal stock. Let's use Neo. I only have one drawing on Neo, so let's delete this. And let's look at Neo throughout the day, kind of how we could have done this. So you grab the first hour of the day, 9:30 to 10:30. This gives you your initial balance. So this one's actually going to be kind of a bad example because it's just a neutral day. But here is your high. Oops. Here is your low. And then here is your POC. So then we can kind of look at how price reacted throughout the day. Where is 10:30? Let's mark that out so we know where we're looking at. 10:30 is right there. Okay, so everything after this mark right here, we could have used these levels to trade. So if you were very bullish on Neo, you needed it to hold above 44.25. This was the line that it must hold if we were going to break out higher. And like maybe we wanted to buy some 45 lottos or maybe some 46 lottos. That's what we were looking for. But it didn't, right? So we lost that level. It came back to retest it, and then we nuked. So if you were like day trading and you wanted to take a bearish like put lotto, you would have been targeting the POC and the value area low. Because we lost the value area high, you were not able to find higher value. So this is very bearish. So once we kind of lost that level, you could have like shorted here, you could have shorted the break. It's up to kind of your trading style. But then you would have targeted the POC, targeted the value area low. So you could have taken like 43 puts, you could have taken maybe 42 puts. The 43 puts would have paid, the 42 puts would have paid for a little bit, but then they would have lost their value. So that's kind of how you could have traded Neo just using that, the initial balance. So we also could have done some analysis throughout the day with the volume profile. So this is just the first hour. Let's take it even further. This would be what it looked like while it was trying to bounce off the initial balance high. So you did gain value up here. You had a nice little value shift. So your initial balance POC was way down here. Your current POC is way up there. So you definitely gained value. You just couldn't hold on to it. So this would be an example of like a bullish day just failing. This started a very bullish move on the day, kind of gave you a bull flag. It just didn't work. And this is a good example of how you use the initial balance and the volume profile to kind of figure out if the day is bullish or bearish. If you were just using the volume profile, you would have got trapped and you would have thought this was a bullish day. But if you were looking at the initial balance, we were not able to stay above the initial balance high, so that is not bullish. Okay, so you want to use a little bit of confluence there. And then another way you could have used this is there was your value area low. So once we lost that level, we were getting pretty bearish. So we lost that level, came back to retest it. Once again, very bearish. Okay. So we could keep drawing this out. And let's take this out to kind of where we are right now. So you see how that shifted? Notice how it was bullish back here. Most of the volume is towards the high. We have a little bit of volume down here. Not a whole lot. And now look at what it's doing now. Now it's bearish. The POC is towards the low of the day. This is kind of a B-shaped day. So if you guys watch my volume profile video, you have an uppercase B shape, which is it's a day that's bullish or bearish. It depends on where the second node is. So if you start the day like this, but then you end the day like this, if that's the second node, it's bearish. If you start the day like this, but then you end the day like this, then you're bullish because the second node is on the top. Okay. So today is bearish because you started the day up here and you ended the day down here. So let me delete this. So now looking at the volume profile of today, let me move this. This is our entire volume profile. So these are the key levels to watch for tomorrow. We have that level there, POC, and then we have a little inefficiency gap right around here. And typically I color code these, so it's not, it's a lot easier to read, right? Like, I'd color code it like this. Okay, so let's pretend like we're closing. What time is it? We have 10 minutes left. So if it closes like this, it's pretty much, there's no way it's going to change the profile. There's only 10 minutes left in the day. This is going to be the profile for tomorrow. So these are the levels you want to watch out for tomorrow. If Neo starts to break above 44.32, we have a little bit of resistance above that because of this node right here. But once we get above that node, this thing could go soaring. Okay, so make sure you watch that. And then tomorrow, watch out for this level down here as well, this 42.74. If you get below that, there's not a whole lot of support below you. We don't have any support from, what is that, Friday, and there's no support today either. You got a little bit of support from that tweezer on the candlesticks, but there's no value down there. It's all kind of single prints. So watch out for that. So this would be the key breakout area. This would be the key breakdown area. All right. We got 10 minutes left. I'm going to do a speed run on Qs just to give you guys a final look. Let me actually catch up with chat before I do that. I appreciate that, Madden. Elite, you said keep SPY or sell. That's your call, man. I can't tell you what to do. What I will say, based on the initial balance, SPY is bullish. Let's see, based on the volume profile, SPY is also bullish on that as well. As long as SPY doesn't lose 440, you should be going higher tomorrow. Below 440, you have a little bit of support at 439.75, 439.60. Below 439.60, then you're bearish. That's all I can tell you. All right, let's do a speed run here on Qs so you guys can get an idea. So this is the initial balance. Here, let me actually, I'll start from scratch. So first hour of the day. I do this at 10:30 every day. If you guys are in Discord, I post the levels in analysis every single day. If you want to color code these, you can, just so you don't get lost. So this would be the initial balance. And as we can see throughout the entire day, Qs has been basically neutral. It hasn't really sustained any breakouts. Okay, so we can delete this, and let's just go throughout the day and see kind of how we could have read this. So this is leaning bullish. You have a most of the volume towards the high. The POC, excuse me, is technically shifting slightly downward. That's not too bad. If this wanted to be extremely bullish, it would have to break and hold above this level right here, which it did not do. So let's pull it out even further. Shifting the value area higher. So this was the initial value area high. Now it's up here. So you are trying to gain a little bit of value. POC still relatively the same. But look at the value area low. The value area low has shifted much higher, which is very bullish. So we're going to mark these out. So this went from there to there. This went from there to there. And then POC is relatively the same. Okay, so you're finding higher value. Let's keep pulling it out. Okay, so still shifting. This actually went down a little bit, so we're starting to consolidate. So the upper section is weakening. It's still shifted higher, but we are weakening. Let's keep drawing it out. Once again, value area low shifting up, so that is pretty bullish. Value area high went up a little bit, so still slightly bullish. Okay, and now let's go to real time. So now real time, value area low shifting higher. Once again, bullish. Value area high, slightly shifting higher. So once again, bullish again. And now look at, this is the big shift. Look at the POC now. The POC was here. Now it's way up here. See the POC shifted? So now all three of our value lines have shifted bullishly on the day. So that means that Qs, even though it's consolidating like this is technically a bullish day. And this is actually preparing for a breakout, most likely tomorrow. The problem is earnings are going to step in the way of that. We're going to have a lot of earnings happening over the next few days. But if pretend like there was no earnings this week, this would have a high chance of going higher tomorrow because of all the shifts. The value area low shifted higher, value area high shifted higher, POC shifted higher. So very likely, if there was no earnings, this would go higher tomorrow. And where you would start to look for a breakout is above that value area high, because there is no node above that acting as resistance. You have a fall off. Okay, so as long as the volume is falling off, there is no like major resistance. Now, if it started to build, like if this started to build up and create a node, then that would be resistance. Define value. If I ever say value, I'm referring to the pink area on my volume profile. That is my value area. My settings are a little different. So here, let me show you guys my settings. I have row size 100, volume total, value area 70, and these are my color settings. Value area up and down are just pink, that pink right there, and then black. And then I just show the POC. I don't show the developing. Okay. All right. So I know this is a mess. This is the major downside to trading volume profile, your charts are going to be extremely messy. Now imagine this with all my indicators. Like my chart is going to be extremely messy. It's basically unreadable. Okay. So that is the one downside. If you are doing this kind of trading, you want to dedicate a chart to your volume profile levels. Like leave it on its own chart. And then use all your other indicators on another chart. Sorry, I saw a couple of you guys asking about Discord. So Discord, if you guys go to oasistrading.io/Discord, you guys can check it out there. We got a few different tiers. We have the $30 tier where you guys get the analysis channel, where I post my daily levels, my weekly watch list, etc. We have Cheddar Flow as well, so I post a bunch of things coming in on our call scanners. That's all for the lower tier. And then for the higher tier, you guys get the indicators and voice chat and all of our trade channels. You guys can check that out there. For free content, if you guys are not interested in the Discord, this is our free content. We do not have a free section in Discord. The stream is our free content. We also have tons of videos on YouTube as well. So if you guys go to my How to Trade playlist on YouTube, there's about 20 videos on there going over different trading techniques. If you guys are in the Discord, we have more trading videos if you go to the mentorship section. So I'm going to do this all 5 days, like I said, Monday through Friday. After this week, if you guys still want to learn more on volume profile, I highly recommend reading Markets in Profile by Dalton. It's kind of old-fashioned. It's a little older book, but the stuff that he teaches in that book is pretty much timeless. I forgot to press my buttons today, guys, so make sure if you guys are new, hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Make sure you guys like the video. Like I said, we're going to be doing these streams 3 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. So make sure you guys come back tomorrow if you guys like the content. So what Bitcoin is basically doing here is, let me actually go back and I'll show you. Let's use this here. So let's look at kind of what it looked like before it started to fail. You see this node that it was building? So it was building like a support here. So you broke out of that, but you were not able to hold that as support. So you had that, you had the breakout, you did not have the support. It tried and then failed. So once you lost this level here, this was very indicative that it was going to go lower. And then you would have targeted the value area high, and you would have targeted the POC. So value area high was hit, and then POC was hit. And now our POC is bouncing perfectly. So as long as it holds the POC, that's okay. If it loses the POC, then we're talking about the value area low. Way down there. Imagine this. We were like building the value. This one's a lot smaller. But we were building this node up, and then we broke out of it and pulled back to retest it, and then it curled off of it. This is kind of what we would like to see with Bitcoin. We did not see that. You see how it created that node, bounced out of it, came back to retest it, could not hold on to it. So if you were really bullish on Bitcoin, you needed it to hold on to that node, and it just couldn't do it. But yeah, I'm going to close the video down, guys. I see a lot of new names in here. Make sure you guys subscribe on YouTube, follow on Twitch. Make sure to like the video on YouTube as well. I do stream 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern. If you guys are in Discord, I will be posting the analysis later tonight. I'm actually going to be away from home for most of the night, so it's going to be a little late. But probably around 11 o'clock-ish, I'll have the levels posted. So watch out for that. If you guys are in the stream, I will see you guys tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern. So see you then. Peace out, guys.